let's get to Spectre, and then I'm sure we'll do some reminiscing about the previous films in relation to our reaction to Spectre. So, Gary, what were your impressions?
Well, I think Spectre has a lot of good ideas, like ideas that were really good, like on paper. I mean, the return of Spectre itself is a great idea. Christoph Waltz is, okay, I'm going to spill the beans for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, but sorry. Christoph Waltz is Blofeld, great idea. The personal connection between Bond and Blofeld is a great idea. And the love of a good woman bringing Bond back from the edge, great idea. It's just that they're all really poorly executed. You know, we know that because of the Sony hack especially, we know that they had script problems before they even rolled cameras on this, and they got noted repeatedly, especially about the third act and all the issues, you know, that come up in that third act, all the logic problems, all the character problems. So they knew this going in, but they were already locked in their release date, you know. I think an audience that, like, say, doesn't really read reviews or study a lot of film criticism, they just inherently can pick up on when they're being told a good story. And like when I saw Casino Royale 4 times in the theater, and each of those 4 times it got applause at the end. I've seen Spectre twice this weekend. Neither time has it got applause.
I have to concur with you that it sounds like I might have liked the movie a little bit more than you did, which is kind of surprising. But I was also got the sense that I was sitting there, you know, laughing at certain scenes and so forth. I found some of it quite witty, in a respectful way, not in a Roger Moore way. And I thought that you know, I was laughing at some of the quips in it, and nobody else was laughing. And then when it was all over, of course, I said, you know, nobody clapped, and it didn't really seem like people were very satisfied with it. And I do have to say this. I think, you know, I totally agree with your statement that people can sense that when something is well told, but they can't really put their finger on it. And I think also that they sense when something is well made, but they don't, like well crafted, but they can't really put their finger on it. And I think one of the reasons that this film might fall flatter in their eyes is that the last movie, Skyfall, was so vibrant to look at. I mean, we were seriously spoiled by those colors that Mendez and particularly Roger Deakins, the cinematographer, treated us to. I mean, it was like something I had never seen in a Bond film ever.
Skyfall was a visual feast, no question. Especially when you saw it in the theater, and there's like that opening shot of Shanghai, which just like blows your eyeballs out. It's like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen on screen.
The incredible fight scene, with the
phenomenal.
Unbelievable.
And it's also too, but you know what it is, Dean? It's also that Skyfall is also a narrative feast, and that even though it's abound with logic problems as well. I mean, like, how does Bond survive getting shot in the chest and falling 300 feet? Apparently he's saved by
I wish I had that problem.
No, he's saved by the power of song. He's saved by the power of Adele, singing the title song, apparently. That's what keeps him alive. But no, I mean, you overlook that because it's just so well told, where Spectre is not a tale well told. And so the myriad defects in this film become more apparent, because your mind is not stuck on the story. It's stuck on everything that's going wrong with it.
Well, I will tell you this, because if you lay out the basic plot of Spectre from beginning to end, and then you look at how it was executed, it seems so much more convoluted than it needs to be, whereas Skyfall felt much more efficient in its storytelling. This one suffers from everything but the kitchen sink syndrome, and I think that's indicative of coming off $1 billion grossing film previously and wanting to outdo it some way and just throwing money at it. But there's some of the parts, some of the deficiencies in the screenplay are so screamingly obvious. Like near the end, when she Sudol, when Leah Sudol, the Bond girl, when she out of the blue just tells them, we're not meant to be together because I know that it's not fair of me to ask you to change, so I'm going to leave now. And essentially, I'm surprised she didn't say, because when I turn this corner, I need to be kidnapped for the plot to continue. You know, it's so
worthless. That character is so worthless during the climax, and if you contrast that with Rebecca Ferguson's character in the last Mission Impossible film, who, you know, single-handedly gets to beat down the super-strong henchman in that picture. Yeah. It shows you why the Mission Impossible take Bond.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this.
Go ahead.
No, am I alone in thinking that this movie sort of dies at when they get off the train in the third act?
That's exactly where it dies. That's what I have in my notes.
It's actually, you know, even though I think the four of us know where it's going because we're into this, we know where it's going. I think the moment they get off the train, I think Robert Bautista from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Dave
Bautista. Dave Bautista. I'm sorry, Dave Bautista. He's actually very good. He doesn't have to say a word. I don't think he's others in line of dialogue. He's very good.
It's the return of the Bond henchman, which is pretty good.
Odd job.
Well, I love that.
Odd job merged with Jaws, merged with Robert Shaw. And he's actually very good. And you could honestly say when he leaves the movie dies.
It still has a lot of logic problems up until then, but I'm willing to overlook them because the film still at least kind of moves at a decent clip until then. But boy, does it die. The momentum just absolutely dies when they get off the train, and they never get it back.
Because
stuff that's very surprising to me for Sam Mendes, because he set such a precedent with Skyfall, and so there are deficiencies in this movie that are particularly surprising. I was excited that Monica Bellucci was in it, an older Bond woman equally as sexy as anyone that has ever been in a Bond movie.
I was led to think that she was going to be a big deal in it, but
what did they do with her? And the scene where he starts to make out with her, it felt like Roger Moore territory. I mean, it felt like, okay, this is the obligatory scene here. And then there were sloppy things like Ralph Fiennes is fighting the bad guy up in the building, and he's distracted when a helicopter flies into view, and he does the whole kind of double take at the helicopter, which allows the bad guy to punch him out. I almost expected there to be a sound effect when he turns his head of like, what the? Like something really corny. Huh? You know, it just felt so sloppy in places.
Well, the sloppy writing is really what does this in, because they set up this really good conflict, I thought, early on, between M and that character you referred to, C. And there's a lengthy sequence you might recall where M even like asks C, "Have you ever killed a man? You have to look into his eyes." And I'm like, okay, they're laying the groundwork for when, because we know that M's going to go up against this guy, and like they're laying the groundwork for when these guys finally are going to go toe to toe, and it's going to be life and death. So I thought that was pretty good. But then you really expect to see them try to kill each other, and what does in C is that he just has bad balance. Like M really plays hardly any role in that.
And I'm sorry, I got to mention one more thing, and then I'll let you guys take the floor. I mentioned this in a little something I wrote up about the movie. My favorite part of the movie was the introduction of Christoph Waltz, the kind of shadowy look of it, and the long stretches of silence, which played very menacingly for me.
Yes.
I was wowed by that particular sequence. But everything about a movie matters, and this is why I say that. Because at the end of it, when he's torturing Bond, he is wearing no socks, loafers, and these high-riding pants. And I'm sorry, he reminded me of Mr. Roper, and I could not be... I could not feel threatened by that.
I couldn't feel threatened by that. Oh, my God. That's by Norman Fell? Oh, my God.
And I was thinking to myself, am I the only one that's feeling this way right now watching this scene? Because I was almost laughing. As Bond was screaming, I was laughing, and people were wondering what was wrong with me, but that was it.
I think that's a great point, actually, and I'll never watch this movie again without thinking of Mr. Roper. But I want to ask something. I thought, as watching it, because given the title, there's a lot of, how should I say it? There's a lot of weight that goes in. When you title your James Bond film Spectre in 2015, a lot of weight goes into that. It's not that much different than the Pierce Brosnan film The World Is Not Enough, which is any James Bond fan knows is the Bond family crest. And The World Is Not Enough had this great opening pre-credit sequence, just wonderful, and then the movie just fizzled after the credits.
Well, here's another point in terms of theme. I do appreciate the fact that they tried to deal with a contemporary theme in that, the government for which James Bond works are not necessarily heroes anymore.
Right.
And we've seen that ourselves in real life events. So Gary, are you appreciative of how they try to incorporate what's going on geopolitically in the world in these Bond movies, or is that kind of irrelevant to the myth of Bond?
I think that kind of actually inadvertently dates the picture when they do that. And like Dean was referring earlier to You Only Live Twice with the opening in outer space. And when you watch it now, it comes off as like rather nostalgic, rather than exciting. You go, there used to be an Apollo space program. How sweet. I think I'll watch Apollo 13 after this, But when I watched this and they tried to address surveillance, another thing, too, is it made me think, well, didn't The Dark Knight already kind of try and cover this anyway? It didn't really seem like all that fresh. And it just seemed like there were more fundamental problems anyway. It's like, if you're going to use SPECTRE, at least, learn what SPECTRE was about. Like, go back and read the books and see how SPECTRE operated. SPECTRE's whole purpose, the way SPECTRE operated was they intentionally caused chaos, between the superpowers. They would always find ways to pit superpowers against each other, and they would profit from that conflict. And there's none of that in this film.
Right.
They basically, create this surveillance net, which they then give to the character of C, and that's basically it. So I never feel like the world's at stake. I never feel huge jeopardy. I never feel like, shit, we're all going to die unless Bond saves us. There was none of
true. That element was not present in the movie, and that's one thing.
I never felt we were in danger. I never felt the world was in danger at all.
For me personally, it sounds like I liked the movie better than everybody else did, but and it could have been because I might have been just, I don't know, there was something in me that was ready to see a movie like this, on the big screen. I didn't see, the Mission Impossible movie earlier this year on the big screen, at least. So this, and I was really taken in. I have to say this, I loved the opening sequence. The opening sequence was superb, I thought.
Well, that's really, if you're going to see the movie, just see it for the opening shot, because that is amazing.
Yeah. Is that the greatest opening sequence of the series in recent memory? That's one of the best opening sequences ever.
Yeah, I really thought so. I really felt extremely excited by it, and I was also sort of put in a really good mood because it's this is going to get into a weird subject matter here, but I miss opening credit sequences. Movies nowadays, most studio movies do not have opening credit sequences. They shove the credits at the end of the movie, and I hate it because everybody gets up, and I'm sitting there. I'm a credit whore, so I like to sit and watch the credits and read all of who did the key grip and everything. So, I miss opening credit sequences, and something about when that credit sequence begins, which is a beautiful credit sequence, even though the song is not really that great.
Oh God, the song is as bad as you all said.
It actually improves. It actually improves with the images of the credits. It really put me in a great mood, and I think that I was just enjoying the sort of bondiness of it all. Really.
Yes.
And,
I understand that.
Oh, I get that.
A lot of times too, Gary schools me on a lot of things that are wrong with certain screenplays that while I'm watching the movies, I might come to Gary and say, "Oh, I really like this movie," and he said, usually we agree on most stuff, but occasionally he'll say, like we were talking about Sicario, for instance, and I was talking about how much I liked that film, but then Gary schooled me on some of the problems with it, and he kind of convinced me, maybe it's not as good as I thought it was.
So Gary is essentially like a Debbie Downer? Is that what you're saying about Gary?
Yeah, basically
No.
Like a big old killjoy.
I want Gary to be on the show.
No, what you are, Gary, is you're a stickler for the internal logic of a story. And for me, I can be very forgiving of a lot of that stuff because unless the plot holes are screamingly, glaringly obvious, there's just something in me that sometimes I don't care about that kind of stuff.
If it's a tale well told, I can look past the logic stuff. And Skyfall has huge logic problems, but they don't matter because it's just such a well told story anyway.
Right.
And the characters are involving. The villain is excellent. But with Spectre, the logic gaps leap out immediately because it's just not a tale well told. I mean, Bond, promises to protect the character of Madeline, Lea Seydoux' character. And how does he protect her? When she gets kidnapped, he goes and shoots at the vehicle she's in and then tries to run it off the road. And I'm just thinking, how exactly is this saving her character? And why are we surprised when she yells at him afterwards?
Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah, that's true.
If they're taking a train to Blofeld's lair, why does Hinks need to attack them on the train anyway, then? They're already going to his boss's lair. What was the point of that whole sequence? I mean, it was a well-staged action scene, but it just really makes no sense. For discussion's sake, I actually think Quantum of Solace was better than this film. Even though I know it's like an unpopular stance. If nothing else, Quantum of Solace at least is an hour shorter than Spectre.
That's a very good point. Actually, you know what I like about Quantum of Solace is if you want to be fair to Quantum of Solace, it plays like the extended third act of Casino Royale. Mm-hmm. That is really, I think, what that film is all about. It's the third act, like an extended, if you will, a DVD extra, a very long DVD extra. I don't think that's as bad as people make it out to be. I don't know what to make of this film. I need to watch it a couple more times, on TBS or Spike TV or whenever it comes on in that time frame. I want to say something. I think Christoph Waltz may be the weakest James Bond villain in some time.
And isn't that surprising? Because when he was cast, I did backflips. I thought he was going to be extraordinary in this. And I was stunned how, again, aside from that opening sequence, which I thought was well done, when you just see him in shadows and he barely speaks, I thought that was great. But after that, he just phones it in. And I could care less. And I could never believe that this guy is the architect of every bad thing that's ever befallen James Bond. Silva and Le Chiffre actually answered to this guy. I just don't buy it.
And they did dispatch him pretty easily. I mean,
but that's another ridiculous part of the movie. I'm so sorry. That's ridiculous. When the facility blows up, and then he shows up in London, and he just has this fresh scar in his face. It's like you just came out of an exploding building. How did you make it back there so fast when you're so clearly severely wounded?
A point that I thought...
That's not Donald Pleasant.
right. But a bigger issue I have with the film, I think what's really a big problem with the picture, too, is that in past movies, especially the Daniel Craig films, Bond is always self-reliant. He is always, to a fault. He's the guy who frequently goes rogue to get the job done. Right. And in this picture, he is way too reliant on Q and Moneypenny. He's constantly badgering them to help him. And to me, that did not feel Bond-like, especially during, the car chase in Rome, which I thought was way too slow, for one thing. But also, when he's in the middle of this chase and you're trying to convey a sense that he's in danger and that there's some stakes, what does he do in the middle of that? He calls Moneypenny. And I'm immediately now taken out of the chase because of that. Right. Because if he doesn't feel he's in that much danger, he can make a phone call then why should I care if the bad guy catches up to him?
Mm.
And then he literally says, "Give me something, Q," when he's like hitting why does he even need the gadgets? I thought that Daniel Craig Bond didn't need the gadgets, that he was above that sort of thing. And now suddenly he's reliant on them when he has to say, "Give me something, Q." That just, to me, it's so at odds with the basics of this character. And again, it took me straight out of the film.
Yeah, let me. Do you think this film, even though when we're talking about, there are a lot of criticisms by John Cleese is one of them, that the humor was missing, but also they were trying to appease everyone with this movie. Did you get that feeling watching it? They were trying to appease the people who saw James Bond, Dr. No, and then the millennials. They were trying to appease everyone. They were trying. This is the problem when you have 4 screenwriters on a movie.
And when you have so much money, you can't afford not to appeal to everyone.
Right.
You have so much money.
Do you think that's why we're having this conversation?
Well, yeah, the whole thing was written by committee, which I guess, again, when you're spending $250 million, it kind of has to be. Because it wasn't just those 4. You had Sam Mendes already told them the sequences that he insisted be in there. You had the studio telling them what they wanted as well. So, when you get to the scale, that's the way it has to be done. And I guess I understand that, from a commerce point of view.
Right.
But if I can just address the humor for a moment, because, there are instances where the humor gets very broad and is back to that Roger Moore, Pierce Brosnan level. And yet, if you look at, Casino Royale has a lot of actually funny bits in it, but they're not the typical Bond type of humor. They're much more sophisticated and witty.
Right.
It was Paul Haggis who did that screenplay. And I think his touch is really sorely missed, on this picture.